people who are addicted, but their families, their friends, their loved ones, their caregivers. Lineups to access addiction treatment are long in this province. We need the services, and the families who access those services when they have a family member need those services. So there are a number of questions around the government's handling of Talbot House. Again, I come back to what is a central issue for us. Why did the Department of Community Services compel the Board of Directors of Talbot House to make a complaint about its executive director to the Cape Breton Regional Police? The board did not have knowledge of any issue with the executive director. It was the Department of Community Services that decided that they had received a complaint and that this complaint must be acted upon. And instead of going to the police itself, they compelled the board to do it. And it's like the board was made to do DCS's dirty work. For some reason, DCS didn't want to do it. And when you contrast, you look at the way that DCS behaved here, where they were only too eager to force a board to go and make a complaint to police, contrast their behavior around the issue of the East Preston daycare, where in fact they refused to do anything more than refer the issue to the police. So we all keep wondering, what's the difference here? Why two different standards? Here they forced a board with no knowledge of the issue to make the claim. And it was a claim that ultimately was found to have no merit. And you have to ask yourself, why is that? And why did it keep the board in the dark? The board indicated to me today, to this day, they have not received any details of why there was a complaint or what the issue was with their executive director. Another issue that we have around Talbot House is the issue of the volunteers on that board. The people who are on the board of Talbot House are quality people. They're highly qualified. Someone referred to me when speaking about them as the cream of the crop in terms of volunteers in Cape Breton. And they said, you know, most boards could only wish to get those people on their board. They're highly qualified and well respected. And yesterday, the minister claimed that DCS offered to help Talbot House with money to hire extra staff while the investigation is underway. And this is true. But the board says that when they asked for an actual person to come in and help run Talbot House when their executive director suddenly resigned, they got no help. They asked for someone from DCS or the Cape Breton District Health Authority to come in and run it, and none was forthcoming. And that is why they closed Talbot House temporarily, as the minister well knew or should have known and declined to disclose to this House. So there's a little more to this story than the minister indicated to this House. And in doing so, in failing to disclose the whole story, why they had to shut down, because they didn't have anyone to act as executive director, the minister maligned the board and misrepresented their conduct, and she owes them an apology. What I've heard from other board members throughout the province is that this action taken by DCS has had a chilling effect on volunteers. And right now we have a list of ABC's, agencies, boards and commissions out there asking for people to serve on their boards, and you have to ask, why would anyone come in if this is the treatment they're going to get from their own minister? And the irony of all this is that it's actually Volunteer Week. When we look at the disclaimer that was listed in the DCS report on the Talbot House organizational review that was given to Talbot House, there's a disclaimer on the third page, and it reads, "It is strongly recommended that the Board of Talbot House consult with legal counsel for disclosing this report beyond the intended audience or making any use of the report or its contents other than the purpose outlined above." So What does DCS do? It posts that same report that it's just warned Talbot House not to disseminate anywhere. It posts it publicly, and it doesn't post Talbot House's response. It just puts it up there for everybody to see. So there was one standard for Talbot House and another one for DCS. On Friday, the Cape Breton Police cleared the executive director. At that point, the minister should have contacted the board, begun to work with them to restore Talbot House's service to the community. But that's not what happened. What happened was that they posted this report, which Talbot House, the Talbot House board has called inaccurate and unfair. And once again, we come back to how this government behaves when people tell it things it doesn't like, when people force the government to look at inconvenient truths. What does it do? It kneecaps those people. And it's the same story with Chignecto Central School Board, with the CFIB. Remember when the finance minister said they should get rid of their executive director here in the Atlantic? The South Shore Board. Anytime a group points out the fallacies that this government tries to perpetuate, the NDP government shuts them down or kneecaps them. They shoot first and ask questions later. Many of DCS's concerns in this report are around issues of paperwork. What goes on there? There are 6 staff. They offer 24/7 care. There's up to 18 men in there. They have a $400,000 budget. And I don't know, but maybe they're so busy actually working with the folks who are trying to get better that they don't have time to fill out all the forms and the reports. And I'm not saying that reports and forms aren't important, but that is not what their core business. That's not why they're there. The board summary says the DCS summary says there's no evidence that the board has been actively overseeing operation of Talbot House. And conversely, there's no evidence DCS has been overseeing the operation of Talbot House. Standards of care came in 2008. What has DCS been doing with this board to help them reach that? Why have they not helped Talbot House, the Talbot House board, reach the goals that DCS has for them before now? Why did it take till December 2011? Other groups that offer services, I've heard from them, they tell me they're subject to rigorous controls and rigorous standards. Why was this case any different? And although the board of, if you look at the Talbot House response on page 3, it says, although the Board of Directors acknowledges that Talbot House has not been in full compliance with the Nova Scotia Department of Community Services standards for recovery houses established in 2008, there is ample evidence that the board was addressing these policy issues in a systemic fashion. They were working on it. Did they get any help from DCS? Not that we've seen. Did DCS bother to talk to any former members of Talbot House, other than those who made the complaints? I can tell you, we've heard from people who say that Talbot House has saved their lives or their sons' lives. So, Mr. Speaker, I believe that this minister owes an apology to the board, to the clients, and to the people of Cape Breton. They are offering a service that the department isn't, and they need to come clean on why they didn't help Talbot House long before now. Thank you.
Thank you. I now recognize the Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As we all know, this is a difficult and an emotional issue for many of the former residents, the staff, the board and the community. However, I do appreciate the opportunity to clear up some of the misunderstandings and the misinformation that the opposition likes to present. We understand the importance of having recovery services in Cape Breton to assist residents with their well-being during a difficult time in their lives. We have heard from our partners that a recovery house is needed in Cape Breton. We agree, and we intend to be there for the people who may require our help. Community Services provides funding to a number of recovery houses around the province. We do not run these recovery houses, the boards do. We fund them. The goal is to provide financial support so these facilities can help people recovering from addiction to transition back to independence. In 2008, the province did a comprehensive review of recovery houses and brought in standards of care. These standards were discussed with all recovery houses to explain compliance. As a funder, we have the authority to review the organization if there are concerns the services we provide funding for are not being provided adequately. Funding for Talbot House was provided by Community Services through a service agreement. Again, this service agreement allowed us to do an organizational review at any time to ensure the facility was providing the services we were giving them funding to provide. The review of Talbot House followed a complaint that involved current allegations about the executive director and the services being provided by the house. As soon as we got the complaint, we advised the board and made arrangements to meet with them at their first available meeting time, which was last November. We have been clear from the beginning that the goal of these reviews is to examine organizations to ensure they are able to provide the services they are receiving funding to deliver according to standards. For example, the review would look at an organization's governance model, programs and services, policies, financial oversight, practices, and board and management practices. Again, the review examines whether services are being delivered according to those standards. This was an internal review conducted by professional staff at the Department of Community Services. The review has been completed and was presented to the Board of Directors on April 4th, 2012. Mr. Speaker, I would like to emphasize that this was an organizational review. It was not a review of an individual, nor was it an inquiry into specific allegations. It was a review that looked at whether the organization as a whole was providing adequate services. The public discussion may have focused on other more personal aspects, but our review was very much looking at the organization. The board agreed to the organizational review. Throughout the process, Mr. Speaker, DCS maintained communications with the board. It has been suggested that information was withheld from the board. That is not true. The board had an opportunity to actually get more information. The complainant agreed to meet with the board. The board of directors did not take advantage of this offer. We made every effort to work with them to ensure the residents of Talbot House were getting the support they required. I would like to take this opportunity to clear up a few incorrect facts that are swirling around on this issue. Number one, DCS did not remove the executive director of the facility as part of the review. The Board of Directors of Talbot House is responsible for the operational decisions, including staffing matters, and they made that decision. Number two, in terms of supporting Talbot House during this time, when the executive director was placed on leave by the board, Community Services offered to provide additional funding for an interim acting executive director and to bring in additional support staff as needed. That offer was still available when the interim director resigned. Number three, DCS did not close Talbot House, Mr. Speaker. The board announced their decision to close on March 7th, 2012. Number four, DCS did not pull or cut funding because of the review. We were more than willing to continue to work with the organization throughout the review again, because we recognize the need for a recovery house in Cape Breton. The board discharged the residents in early March. The result was that they were no longer providing a service. When their funding expired at the end of March, there was no longer anything to fund. We continue to provide funding for the former residents who wish to continue with their recovery elsewhere in the province. We assisted the residents who chose to transition into the community with a variety of supports. Following the closure of the house, we maintained our commitment to providing the board with the review. With regard to identified areas of concern, our first approach is always to continue working with an organization to see how those could be addressed. Understandably, there was quite a bit of public interest in making the DCS organizational review public. We had a number of requests for the documents. We made the review public on April 16, 2012, after the board had an opportunity to review the document. It is not unusual for the department to post reviews online. For instance, a recent example is the Braemore review. It is available for anyone to read, and it is clearly focused on the organization's policies and practices and not on individuals. I will focus for a moment on the aspects of the report that have been discussed publicly. The budget. Talbot's House Board of Directors filled out Schedule B in the service agreement document. This is a very high-level summary which describes how an organization intends to use funding. But it does not replace an organizational budget, which has more detailed budget line items that can be tracked on a monthly basis. There was no evidence of a formal process to track expenditures on a monthly basis to ensure they were spending the funding in accordance to how it was proposed. The complaint. Community Services has not discussed in public the nature of the complaint that was received. However, Community Services consulted with the complainant, and as a result, he agreed to meet with the board. The board of directors did not take action when that specific opportunity was presented to them, which would have provided the board with more information. In closing, Mr. Speaker, this review is not about individuals, it's about the organization and how it is running. We value all Nova Scotians who donate their time to be on boards of organizations like this around the province. We appreciate the time that they dedicate and the challenges that can come with this role. Reviews are designed to identify challenges so that the department can work with boards to provide the best service possible and make improvements where necessary. The well-being of the residents is our common concern and priority. While there are concerns with Talbot House at the moment, if these were addressed, we would look at working with them again. Community Services will be assessing the options that are available for services in the coming weeks. Mr. Speaker, we have heard from our partners that services are needed in Cape Breton, and we are committed to making that happen. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Victoria the Lakes.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as many in this House know, Talbot House has provided guidance for men suffering from addiction for many years. The board and staff at Talbot House has been devoted to facilitating recovery and rehabilitation of people across Nova Scotia and indeed Atlantic Canada. The actions of the Minister of Community Services surrounding her review of Talbot House have been reckless and irresponsible. Her handling of her department is not up to the level expected of a minister. Mr. Speaker, the Minister has created a double standard with regards to allegations of abuse. In the case of East Preston Daycare, she felt no responsibility to alert the Board of Directors about an alleged abuser that was working in direct contact with small children. When the board found out from the media, Mr. Speaker, from Frank Magazine, employment ended. Mr. Speaker, the board acted in a responsible manner and did what was in the best interest of the little girls and boys they cared for. Parents have spoken out against the minister's actions. The people of Nova Scotia do not believe she did the right thing. But yet, Mr. Speaker, in the case of Talbot House, the minister went forward without a second thought to publish the nature of the allegations against the executive director, despite them being false and discredited. The minister is hopelessly reckless in her decision-making. Mr. Speaker, the minister says that regardless of whether the allegations were true or false, they were following their due diligence. It's abhorrent that she didn't follow due diligence when it came to the well-being of preschoolers. Mr. Speaker, the minister launched a full-fledged organizational review of Talbot House when concerns were brought forward. But the minister kept accusations of pedophilia secret with East Preston. She launched no full-scale review of whether the children there faced a current and real risk in 2010. Instead, Mr. Speaker, she misdescribes the problem as historic. But it isn't that simple, Mr. Speaker. While the abuse allegations are historic, the risk was 100% current. The best predictor of behavior is past behavior. If there are serious allegations of serious harm to children backed by evidence in whatever form, and the government is aware, it knows about a real, current risk of that behavior being repeated. If our most vulnerable, our children, are exposed to the possibility of that harm being revisited, that is a major and current danger. This minister, Mr. Speaker, this minister utterly failed to do her job, to protect children as is her duty under the law. Today, the minister, Mr. Speaker, touted her commitments to boards. She said, "It's our duty to go to the board of directors." History shows, Mr. Speaker, in the words of government, that this is simply not true. She defends her decision to keep an alleged child abuser safe and fails to go in her duty to go to the board. She defends her decision to spray false allegations against Father Paul Abbas, Executive Director at Talbot House. She failed in her duty to go to both boards by not telling them the nature of the allegations. The minister's messaging today, Mr. Speaker, finally contains an accurate statement. She does have a duty to go to the boards. However, the minister doesn't understand what that duty means or to whom she's responsible. Mr. Speaker, how can we accept that the minister understands her duty when she applies a double standard? Her actions suggest that maybe the minister doesn't believe these boards have the capability to do the right thing. This minister is working in a silo, Mr. Speaker, in an ivory tower. She has a clear aversion to disclosure. The board of directors of any organization deserves to know all details about any allegations made against an employee because they have a responsibility. What has unfolded as a result of the minister's reckless behavior is tragic. The minister mishandled the situation at Talbot House, has questioned the ability of the executive director, has discredited a board full of well-known, dedicated individuals, and she must account for her actions. Mr. Speaker, each day the minister lets another contradicting detail come out about the protocol followed by her department. Let's be clear, there is no protocol for what happened at East Preston. If there were, it would have been tabled by now. There is nothing, Mr. Speaker, nothing that says she could not pick up the phone and do the right thing. There is nothing that says that the most basic thing she could do would be to protect the children could not be done. But suddenly, Mr. Speaker, for Talbot House, it's her duty to notify the board. She says it's a duty. Well, what protocol is she following in this case, Mr. Speaker? An imaginary protocol that changes to protect the minister? It's okay not to call the board when she has information, presumably from another department that might protect vulnerable children, but she has to call the board when she has false information about a priest in a home serving adult men. The whole notion of a protocol is what the minister wants it to be when it defends a really bad decision, Mr. Speaker. For that, Mr. Speaker, is what it's all about. The minister made horrible, indefensible decisions. Decisions that in both situations maximize the possible risk, the most possible harm to the most vulnerable people. Mr. Speaker, the minister cannot justify the mistakes she has made any longer. The minister must admit that she failed in her duty to the boards. The pattern cannot be ignored. The minister, Mr. Speaker, is not up to the job, and it's time to recognize that. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. With no other speakers remaining, the time for late debate now is over. I thank all the honourable members for an excellent debate, and we will now take a short recess as we get the Minister of Health and Wellness back in the chair with her staff. Thank you.
Order. Committee of the Whole House on Supply will now come to order. We'll carry forward with the Resolution E11 with Minister of Health and Wellness, and I would recognize the Honourable Member for Kings West at the beginning of your 1 hour.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And there was just a few other questions that I did want to finish up with in regards to the IWK. And the Minister talked about the mobile crisis unit, and I know it is getting good reviews in its work. However, I'm wondering, is this available just in the Capital District, or does it have any place? Is it used in rural Nova Scotia as well, or does it connect to EHS in some significant way?
The Honourable Minister of Health and Wellness.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and I thank the member for the question. You know, the mobile crisis unit has an interesting history, and it goes back a number of years. In my constituency, the north end of Halifax on Gottingen Street is an organization near and dear to my heart I've spoken about in the past, the North End Community Health Centre. And the North End Community Health Centre was one of the first community health clinics in the province. And it must be more than 30 years old now. And the North End Community Health Centre can be credited with a lot of very interesting and innovative healthcare programs throughout our city here. And the Mobile Crisis Centre was born out of the North End Clinic. And under the auspices, the leadership of just a fabulous person called Johanna Oostefeld, who used to be the coordinator, the executive director of the North End Community Health Centre. And Johanna, for many, many years, was a health activist and an advocate for more primary-based health care, more community-based health care, less bricks and mortar kind of health care. And when Johanna was the coordinator for the North End Clinic, probably, I would guess, back in the 90s, back in the early 90s, I'm guessing, the North End Clinic recognized that patients of the North End Clinic frequently required services outside of banking hours, and that the emergency rooms weren't always the right place for people to get services, especially people who were in crisis and particularly any kind of mental health crisis. So the clinic applied to Health Canada for funds that Health Canada had available for demonstration projects. And they were successful in getting funding to set up a mobile crisis unit as a pilot project. And the mobile crisis unit at that time, I think, only provided services 2 or 3 days a week and a very small number of hours. And they tested this crisis unit, and they were able to demonstrate that this was a very effective way to divert people in crisis from the emergency department and provide the crisis intervention that is necessary for people who are perhaps in danger of harming themselves or someone else in a very quick and effective way. And this project was so successful that it was adopted by the Capital District Health Authority. And for a number of years, it continued to be funded through the DHA, but not as a 24/7 service. Eventually, that service was expanded, and it was built on, I think, the bringing in of the specialized police officers is another level of service, a really important feature of this crisis service, because we know that police are frequently out in the community. They may be called to a household where there is a domestic dispute, or there may be, some other alteration going on. And to have at their disposal a crisis unit that can come in to a household with them, people who have the right skills to assess the situation, help diffuse what may sometimes be very, very dangerous kind of situation. And really then do the follow-up with the individuals and ensure that they get the right care. So the Mobile Crisis Unit is, that's kind of its history. It's just a phenomenal service, and all of the evaluations were so positive around this service that it was a no-brainer in terms of the expansion of that service to 24/7. That service now, as I indicated, is also, it includes the IWK, as well as the Capital District Health Authority, the Halifax Police Department, and EHS also are involved. Protocols exist between these various agencies and the service in terms of, how people get called and what level of care is provided by whom and when and where. And it is a service that is available only in the Capital District Health Authority. Other DHAs have looked at this service. They look at it probably with some envy. And there are DHAs that are considering whether or not they have sufficient need in their areas, in their districts, to adopt similar services, even modify, at a modified level. And I know that the Mobile Crisis Unit is certainly of interest in the Cape Breton area. It's certainly of interest in the Truro area. And if I'm not mistaken, I think that I have heard that in the Annapolis Valley, there may be an interest in some features or some aspects of having a mobile crisis unit. To the best of my knowledge, we have not had proposals come forward from other district health authorities for mobile crisis. I can't say that with absolute certainty, but I don't think it is the case. But it's a service that I have a great deal of respect for. And when I was doing my PhD thesis, I did some shifts at Bryony House overnight, and I saw the mobile crisis unit in action. We had a woman who had come into the transition house who suffered a psychotic break while she was in the house at 2 o'clock in the morning. And there was on staff that night one transition house worker, one of the crisis counselors, who had to answer the phone, answer the door, and deal with residents in the house, and myself, who really was there more as an observer than anything else. And so what she decided to do, and this was, in the middle of the night, was call the Mobile Crisis Center, and they arrived at the shelter at the transition house, and they came into the living room area, and they spent, I would say, at least 2.5 hours with the woman, and until her distress had kind of been reduced, and we were able, to have her stabilized, and then determine that the next day she was in a safe place for the rest of the night, and there was no need to have her removed from the shelter. And the next day we were able to get her to see her own physician, who was very familiar with her medical history, and was able to provide her with the kind of health care that was appropriate at that time. So it is a very, very important service. Staff have indicated to me that as part of the 12-13 budget and as part of the Every Kid Counts commitment, our government will establish 24/7 mental health mobile crisis teams with special training in the prevention of youth suicide, starting with expanding the service throughout the HRM. Because if my memory serves me correct, we have this service here in the urban core, but in areas such as Musquodoboit and maybe some of these more outlying areas, the mobile crisis unit is not fully functioning. And so we really need to look at the needs of the entire community and you know, what our experience is with respect to our emergency rooms, our various crisis lines, and what have you. So discussions will be held with EHS and our other stakeholders around this service. And as we move forward with improvements in mental health service, this certainly will be an area that will receive some focus and attention.
The honourable member for Kings West.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Madam Minister. And that certainly is a positive development to hear that it is well anchored in the core of HRM and being looked at to pick up some of the outlying areas, and perhaps again that model may be again an area that perhaps we can look at in appropriate places throughout all of Nova Scotia. One of the I guess areas that was touched upon today by one of the family who contacted me and some of the IWK workers. The ACT program used to have 2 psychologists working with the clinical team. Now there is 1, and 1 is working on community-based programs. I'm just wondering if the minister could provide some sense of how she and the Department of Health view the current mental health resource base, because this is one of the areas that I keep hearing that you know we really still have many needs in our communities, and in fact, if we're going to be providing, as the minister says, more professional help, more ongoing support outside of you know, bricks and mortar and in our communities. And this is why I like the mobile crisis unit, the flexibility and so on it provides. And I know along the way I've had several discussions at different years with Dr. John Campbell, who I have a very, very high regard for, and he does provide kind of a sense of where they are, at least in the DHA in the valley that I'm most familiar with, that, you know, they've recruited 2 or 3 additional people in recent times, and as 2 or 3 retire as well. But I'm just wondering how the department sees itself in terms of a plan to, again, move more services into a community-based model.
The Honourable Minister of Health and Wellness.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And I think that, you know, first of all, earlier I spoke about how resources have grown. Investment in mental health services, and specifically at the IWK, for example, have significantly grown. One day I asked people in the department if they could tell me of all of the resources we spend on healthcare, what proportion do we spend on mental health? Because you always hear that, conversation about how mental health services are shortchanged. And so I went looking actually to try to find out, well, what should you be spending on mental health as a proportion of your healthcare system? What is that magic number? And where does that come from? The idea that you should be spending so, this proportion. Well, as far as I can tell, the World Health Organization is kind of the purveyor of the idea that countries should spend about 7% of their healthcare expenditure on mental health services. Here in Nova Scotia, we spend about 6.55% of our healthcare resources on mental health and addiction services. And there are some expenditures we'll never be able to really figure out because, for example, physicians will see people on fee-for-service that's not necessarily delineated in a way that we can identify. But we can break down, we can break down mental health administration, the pharmaceutical costs related to mental illness, specific mental health program funding, anything that goes into alternate levels of care, long-term care, and what have you. So we do have the capacity to do that. And using those numbers, we are able to say that we're not quite where the World Health Organization standard is, but we're getting very close as a province. I don't know how that would compare if you looked at other provinces. I haven't really done enough research on that and looking into it. In terms of community-based mental health services, we all know that whether or not someone has supportive housing at all, supportive housing, whether or not someone has a job, whether or not someone has adequate nutrition, all of these things are features that contribute to good mental health and mental wellness. And so again, it's very difficult to actually, because this is such a big, when you start trying to really unpack and look at what does the Minister of Community Services in her department, how many people are being housed in public housing, for example, social housing, are at subsidized rates, because that's what social housing does, is it gives you affordable rates of housing. What percentage of those folks are people who have mental health disorders, and do you figure this into the equation of what you're investing in mental health? But without question, the healthcare system cannot address mental health and mental wellness on its own. The healthcare system requires that the silos between departments need to be taken apart, and there needs to be more collaboration. The Department of Community Services and their approach to housing needs to be factored in to what the Department of Health is doing, as is the Department of Justice. We certainly saw in the Howard Hyde case the intersection between a number of different agencies across a department. We need to harmonize our policies, our approaches, our training, our understanding. And then we have education, big piece, especially with young people, especially in terms of, well, today I think there was a focus on bullying and cyberbullying and just plain old-fashioned bullying and the impact of that on children who are more fragile and not as resilient, and in some cases are, as a result of the bullying, require services, and you know, and perhaps in some cases are kids who have perhaps a learning disability, some little thing that singles them out as being a little bit different and makes them targets for these kinds of, you know, these kinds of activities on the part of other children. We've all seen this, and kids can be mean to each other, and with a terrible impact. The healthcare system is not capable to deal with this stuff all on its own. It really requires collaboration, coordination, cooperation between a lot of different departments. And this is the approach that we have attempted to take. We see the Schools Plus program expanding. It's a program that in some schools offer the kinds of services, early intervention and assessment services, the healthcare system coming out and being more readily available and accessible in schools. Things like the teen healthcare centers, a very important feature of doing wellness and mental wellness in the school system. And as well, the Minister of Community Services and I talk, as do our officials, and are working very closely around a housing strategy that will have as you know, a feature of that strategy attention to the needs of people who have mental health disorders. And you know, we know that already the housing that is provided is, in many cases, a large portion of that is housing that's for people who have mental health disorders. But does it have that supportive component? Does it have the, you know, does it have the kind of services that will be readily available to help identify when a tenant in a housing situation is getting into difficulty and has the capacity to move quickly to ensure that it doesn't develop into a crisis that requires hospitalization, acute, you know, the acute care system, the ER department, and whatever. So there are many, many things that we can do in the community, but from my perspective in the Department of Health, that needs to be done in a very collaborative fashion with other departments, and we need to look quite broadly. The last thing, and we haven't had our focus so much has been on discussing mental health for children and youth, but a huge area that's growing exponentially is mental health for seniors, you know, and the whole onset of early onset of Alzheimer's, of dementias, and the components that come with illnesses of the brain very often are mood disorders, serious depression, in some cases personality, significant personality changes, And we are just, we are just beginning to think about what it is that we have to be doing to not only address the needs of the seniors population, but how do you support their caregivers? How do you support the families that are dealing with and providing care? So, once again, we haven't had much opportunity to talk about the $20 million of investment in home care for seniors, and whether or not some components, any components of that can be used for not only the physical well-being of seniors in their homes, but what about the mental wellness of people in their homes? What about the cognitive abilities of people in their homes? And also, how do you ensure that there's enough respite for the caregiver who's caring for an elderly person who may have some psychiatric symptoms as a result of whatever illness that they may be suffering through.
The Honourable Member for Kings West.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And I think Madam Minister kind of perhaps elaborated and touched somewhat there on what may be components of the mental health strategy, because I am sure it will be, a youth to seniors look at the kind of mental health needs that we have in the province, and the kind of plans and programs that can help reach the desired goals and outcomes of better mental health, better wellness for all of our citizens. And we know some of the deficits. That being said, I just want to take a look at page 13.11 under mental health programs. Is this the line item where we find the money being set aside for the mental health strategy, knowing that it soon will be released, or sometime during this budgetary year, we will know the look of the mental health strategy, and I think the Minister is indicating that there will be monies, there will be funding to get some of the initiatives in place. So I'm wondering, in fact, if this is the line item where we find the money being set aside for the mental health strategy.
The Honourable Minister of Health and Wellness.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And the staff are going to help me out here a little bit. So I'm losing my memory, but yes, we have in this budget $3.8 million set aside for the mental health and addictions strategy. And in addition to that, there's the $356,000 for the expansion of the addictions treatment program in the Annapolis Valley District Health Authority. So it's approximately $4.2 million in new expenditure for this year. And as the member indicated, the details of that will be released when we release the strategy. And the work, people are scurrying to try to get that finished. You know, the folks who worked on the mental health strategy, they did a terrific job. And when people, first of all, the advisory group did a terrific job. They held public consultations all over the place. It was stunning, really, to learn how many people they heard from. It was well over 1,000 people who came out to meetings, and they added additional meetings in order to be able to accommodate all of the people who wanted to appear in front of them. In addition to the consultation, there was some commissioned research. And the commissioned research wasn't concluded until the fall, sometime in September. And this accounts for the delay in being able to bring forward a final product, but it will be coming forward very, very soon. Now, I would say that we have set this amount of money aside. It will be to start doing some of the preliminary work on implementing a mental health strategy. And again, I have to say, the more time I spend in the Department of Health, the more time I'm convinced that money is not the conversation we need to be having. The conversation we need to be having is effective models that will give us outcomes that are based in evidence. And my approach, and again, we have not been able to do enough in the community because we have been tied into models that have absorbed too much resources that you can never get away from in kind of beds and bricks and mortar. So the more we can do upstream, early, community-based, the more likely we are going to have a healthier population, a population where mental wellness is a greater feature of their lives. And so I'm very much looking forward to the mental health strategy and then really doing a fair amount of heavy lifting to see that it moves forward in a way that really does make a difference.
The honourable member for Kings West.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and as well, we'll welcome the mental health strategy when it does come forward. I wanted to take a look at some of the other program spending line items. In the master agreement initiatives have been budgeted for $21.8 million, and I was just wondering a sampling of specific initiatives that are included in this budgeted amount. In other words, just taking a bit of a breakdown on $21.8 million that is part of the master agreement initiatives.
The Honourable Minister of Health and Wellness.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the question. As I was saying the other evening, the master agreement is it's very complex, and there are a lot of different components to the agreement, and ways essentially to reimburse our family physicians for particular kinds of changes that they themselves will be making in their practices. So probably the biggest, in fact, the biggest change is the emergency medical record. And we talked the other evening around the electronic medical record. To be honest, I don't know the difference between the emergency medical record and the electronic medical record, but it's certainly something that I can check on and let the member know. It is it's $4,500,000. It's a significant initiative. Yeah, that's right. And staff have just told me it's an incentive for the physicians to go on an electronic medical record. So I'm just not sure why we call it an emergency medical record, but I'm sure there's a reason for that. There are a number of other features, and one of the big ones that I am very, very keen on, and so is Dr. John Chasson, the president of Docs Nova Scotia, family doc from Antigonish, is the chronic disease management incentive. And this is just fabulous. And as you know, we have very high rates of chronic disease in Nova Scotia, and we need to be able to have our family physicians spend more time with patients who have chronic disease, doing education, and really providing them with support. We see people who go into, and I know every member in here has had somebody call them in their constituency and complain about the physician's office that they went to that had the sign on the wall that said you're only allowed one thing for one visit per visit, okay? That is the antithesis of chronic disease management. That is and we've set this up in the way we remunerate, you know, that we pay physicians. We've set it up so that that is the result that you get. That's the kind of medicine you get. But that is not the kind of medicine that we need. We need medicine where people are able to go in and they have a variety of issues that they need to raise that are generally connected because of a chronic condition. And so we have incentive and an initiative in the master agreement of slightly more than $4 million to address that. And just going back to the first item, it indeed is the electronic medical record, an incentive. And I think last night we talked about how we have planned for 200 more family physicians to be on electronic medical records this year. That's our objective. Thank you. In addition to that, there are a number of other things. I know the member would be very interested in knowing that in the master agreement, there's a rural specialist incentive program, and it's in excess of $3 million. So this is targeted not at general GPs, but at getting the right specialties into rural communities. For example, psychiatrists. As the member would probably know, we have a real difficult time getting psychiatrists in our rural communities. So we're able to use these little pools of money to incent and meet the patient needs throughout our province. We also have a collaborative practice incentive program, and it's a $3 million program as well. And as you know, collaborative practice is something that we want to encourage, and we will be setting up more collaborative practices around the province in the coming year. And the ones that we have are working very well, and people are very happy in them. We also have some money in that pool for continuing medical information or continuing medical education. And so this is, of course, very, very important for physicians. The world of medicine, like the world for the rest of us, is changing very, very rapidly. And we need to provide our doctors with an opportunity to stay current in their fields of practice and be up to date on all of the latest information that's coming out. And the physicians take great advantage of these incentive programs. Dr. Chasson, the president of Doctors Nova Scotia, was relating to me how pleased he was and how pleased the physicians he practiced with are that they have so many opportunities in the master agreement to change some of their practices more satisfactory for them as physicians and better for their patients, and as well to have opportunities for continuing medical education is extremely, extremely important. There also is a line item in this pool for comprehensive care incentive program, and I'm not entirely sure what that consists of, but staff will help me here. I was going to guess it would be care targeted at seniors, and it looks like maybe in part, but not exclusively for sure. So it's financial incentive for GPs to provide a comprehensive breadth of services for their patients, such as nursing home services. So it means having physicians see their patients when they're admitted to a long-term care facility, as well as hospital care, obstetrical deliveries, and visits to newborns. And so this is, you know, this is another piece. So all of those things together more or less add up to the $21 million that the member was making reference to. And again, the master agreement, as I indicated the other evening, is a very big document. And this, this particular range of features in the master agreement are a drop in the bucket, really.
Order, please. The time allotted for the Committee of the Whole House on Supply has elapsed. I now recognize the Honourable Government House Leader.
Madam Chair, I wish the committee to now rise and report progress.
The motion is carried. The committee will now rise and report its progress to the House.
The Chair of the Committee of the Whole House on Supply reports
that the Committee of the Whole House on Supply has made considerable progress, and begs leave to sit again.
Carried. I will now recognize the Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, could you please call public bills for second reading, Bill number 5, the Municipal Government Act.
Public bills for second reading, Bill number 5, the Municipal Governments Act. The Honourable Member for Richmond.
Thank you, Speaker. The other evening I had the opportunity to say a few brief remarks on Bill number 5. expressing some of the concerns there, and we're certainly hoping that the minister responsible for Service Nova Scotia Municipal Relations may be able to address some of those concerns, and just highlighting them again. The question becomes, Mr. Speaker, as to why this is not being offered by Efficiency Nova Scotia. One would suspect that that agency, which has its own staff and everything, and that's already being paid for by ratepayers in Nova Scotia who use electricity through Nova Scotia Power, that there's already infrastructure in place to do this. The challenge is that we're already hearing from UNSM and from our own municipal units about the issue of downloading and the fact that this is going to be another level of administration that they're going to have to be able to put in place. The other question which I raised, Mr. Speaker, which I look forward to the Minister responding, is that will the Department of Service Nova Scotia Municipal Relations provide a template to the municipalities as to how they can implement such a program to allow their ratepayers to be able to purchase solar panels and have it charged back against their property taxes? Or are we leaving it to each municipal unit to come up to its own system? Which begs the question of, why would we have a system that may be offered in Yarmouth but not offered in Shelburne, may be offered by CBRM but not offered by Inverness, and so on? I think this is something, an initiative that we would like all Nova Scotians to be able to take advantage of who wish to do so, regardless of where they live. But when you have these piecemeal type of approach, it raises that concern that not every Nova Scotian may be able to benefit from this. Again, Mr. Speaker, one of the issues which I raised, and again, hopefully the Minister might be able to address, is previously the Department of Energy had a rebate program that was offered prior to the creation of Efficiency Nova Scotia. And solar panels were eligible for a certain rebate, but it was only a certain type of solar panel. In fact, it was the ones that one would use to heat hot water. It did not apply to solar panels used to produce electricity. And that was a concern which, as I mentioned before, was raised by a local company in my constituency, Appleseed Energy, which saw tremendous opportunity and great interest from Nova Scotians who wanted to install solar panels for the generation of electricity, but there was no rebates or incentives offered by the province to do so. They did provide me with literature, which I believe other Canadian provinces, a number of states in the United States, offer some very generous incentives currently for these, and the question was, why would we not join in that, especially since we are a province, like so many other areas, that enjoys the sun and could benefit from this new means of reducing our carbon footprint and reducing our over-reliance on Nova Scotia Power. So, Mr. Speaker, those were some of the concerns which I did raise. Again, as I mentioned, these are troubling times in the Strait area. When we talk about the Municipal Government Act and municipalities, and as you're probably aware, Mr. Speaker, right now the members of the union from the former New Page Mill are voting. In fact, I believe they ended voting around 6 o'clock. And we are awaiting the results as to whether they've accepted the contract offer put forward by the Stern Group. So these are trying times. That is a facility which pays a significant part of the tax revenues for my own municipality in Richmond. As well, it has an impact on the municipal revenues through property taxes of the employees and the suppliers in municipalities throughout the entire Strait area, whether it be Inverness, whether it be Victoria, whether it be Cape Breton Regional Municipality, Antigonish, Guysborough, and even further. So these are challenging times and worrisome times, and we await tonight for the news as to whether that contract offer has been accepted. As well, we'll be looking for updates from the Minister of Natural Resources as to where the negotiations for Crown land leases will be as well. And then certainly hoping that the negotiations with Nova Scotia Power are productive at the same time. So with that, Mr. Speaker, as I mentioned, this is a bill which I believe has good intentions. I believe there's more information that we would like to see from it, and certainly better guarantees either from the minister or through UNSM that this is a program that will be offered in all municipal units throughout the province, so that all Nova Scotians can benefit from that. So I am looking forward to more information on this, but certainly happy that the minister did bring it forward for debate here in the House, and I do thank you and the House for the opportunity to make those brief comments on Bill number 5, the Municipal Government Act amended. Merci.
Thank you. The honourable member for Inverness.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And it's my pleasure to rise tonight to speak on behalf of the Progressive Conservative Caucus. We understand this legislation is something that's being asked for by municipalities. That's a sign that there's interest out there by the municipalities to do this, and the government is enabling them to do that. That is a good thing. I've done a little research myself, Mr. Speaker, and I've heard that some of the councillors here in HRM, when similar legislation was passed to enable HRM to offer solar panels, that councillors have been swamped with requests from people who want to add these solar panels to their homes. And I know there's been, as I understand, there's been a bit of a delay in getting the process in order, but the interest seems to be there on the part of the public to add these solar panels to their homes. I think people believe in the philosophy. There seems to be some question in terms of the payback on these panels. At least that's what I've been told by the councillors I've spoken with. And I think it would be beneficial for the government in the passing of this legislation to come forward and table some background numbers on how this actually works. Perhaps a case study, if you will, Mr. Speaker, that would show that if somebody agrees to add a panel to their home, that it shows the number of years required at the certain rate of whatever the municipality is going to charge for it, how many years it's going to take for revenue to come in to pay for the panel and pay for the financing of it, because we understand that is going to be accepted responsibility by the municipality to finance the purchase of these devices and to pay for them over time. Because, Mr. Speaker, I'm sure that no member in the legislature here would like to see solar panels, for whatever reason, after so many years, come to the end of their useful life, and a municipality be required to take off a panel which had lived beyond its useful life before it had actually been paid for. We wouldn't want, in this legislature, I'm sure no member would want to put municipalities in a position where they would have to shoulder the cost to pay for a solar panel that was no longer of any use to the public. And I know municipalities have asked for this legislation, so that is a risk that I think that they're taking on. If they have the information, that's great, Mr. Speaker. I do think we would benefit in this House from seeing the minister table information, because I think that would be helpful. And if the case is there for it, there should not be any pushback to tabling such information. I guess the question that comes to mind is why is the government choosing this method to encourage the use of solar panels? And I know that we have primarily a monopoly in this province on the supply of energy through Nova Scotia Power, and obviously Nova Scotia Power has no interest in this form of energy. That leads me to question, Mr. Speaker, why. I don't have that answer, but I guess I'm left to prognosticate here tonight. But I think it's a question that, it should be answered as well. If Nova Scotia Power does not see these devices as something it wants to be involved with, I guess I'm hoping that still they make economic sense and environmental sense, Mr. Speaker. They certainly, if we were to assume they would make sense, we're harvesting energy from natural sources through the sun and providing it to consumers. So hopefully, we can't assume the cost is free, but I think there again brings us back to the need to have numbers tabled to show that these solar panels, that they make sense. And so I guess that's why, if nobody else wants to do this, Mr. Speaker, I guess it's left to the municipalities. I can see why they would be suitable from a billing perspective when it comes to paying for it, if they're willing to accept financing of it. They have the mechanisms through property taxes and through water billing. They have a system of accounting set up and a system of billing set up that they could provide another utility, being solar panels, to consumers. So I can see from a billing perspective why they may be appropriate. I guess the other thing I think about, Mr. Speaker, though, is why isn't something like this, if it makes so much sense, why doesn't it just happen by way of the private sector? If there's a compelling case to have solar panels on your home, why isn't that able to be made through the private sector? And I know there are groups, there are companies that offer solar panels. I've met with them myself. They seem to present a good case. But at the end of the day, consumers, like anybody else, consumers are going to they're going to purchase things that make economic sense. So I guess it kind of concerns me that solar panels have to go through financing by municipalities, because it may suggest that they may not be the most efficient form of energy that consumers could purchase. So, Mr. Speaker, I think the main question that I would ask in looking at this legislation to enable municipalities to put these solar panels in place is, are municipalities required to give a breakdown of the actual cost effectiveness of the solar panels over time, so that consumers can be assured that they have all the information they need to make a decision whether or not they want to become a purchaser of this form of energy. I respect if municipalities are owning the asset and charging the consumer, then perhaps the municipalities are accepting that risk. But again, Mr. Speaker, I think that is the heart of this matter. If it can be easily answered, then, Mr. Speaker, I know myself personally, I would have no problem supporting this legislation. But I guess I wonder if the numbers will actually be presented to us here in the legislature. So, Mr. Speaker, it is up to consumers to decide if they want to use these solar panels, but I would hope that there's a full, transparent disclosure of the numbers behind the solar panels, and so that consumers can compare the cost effectiveness of using the solar panel to, say, using electricity from Nova Scotia Power. And if they have that information, I think that would be allow them to make a fair comparison and to make an informed decision. And I think, Mr. Speaker, all members of this legislature should strive to ensure that Nova Scotians have all the information they need to make decisions. And I think we can do that in this legislature by way of having the minister perhaps table a case study that shows a typical example of somebody adding a solar panel, however many number of them they would add to their home, the monthly cost for that, and showing the projected lifespan of the asset to ensure that the cost is covered for the asset. And I think we owe that to municipalities, Mr. Speaker, to ensure that before we pass legislation here in this legislature, that we're not just looking out for our own interests, for provincial interests, but we're looking out for the interests of our municipal governments, because we're all representing the same people, Mr. Speaker, Nova Scotians. So I would encourage the minister to table the information. so that this is transparent and that we have all the information. And I will conclude my remarks with that this evening, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Thank you. The Honourable Member for Preston.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's with pleasure I stand and discuss some concerns I have regarding Bill number 5. And I'll start off by saying, to begin with, that I think solar panels and solar energy, renewable energy, is a wonderful thing. And we haven't done enough in this province to embrace it and to ensure that we can remove ourselves from fossil fuel at all levels, hopefully someday, and we can rely on renewable energy such as solar panels, wind turbines, or whatever the case may be as technology advances and improves over the time. I do have some problems, though, with the municipalities doing this type of activity. This type of activity, and I know the Halifax Regional Municipality does it now, but this type of activity really should be left to financial institutions to finance these type of acquisitions, or indeed it should be to Efficiency Nova Scotia. Efficiency Nova Scotia is set up to do this. They're absolutely set up to do it. They were in our Public Accounts Committee the other day and gave a very interesting discussion on how they can provide loans. They can provide forgiveness on loan interest. They can provide loans that are forgivable. They can generate grants that can give to people to do things. And indeed, all of us are paying for that ability for that organization, on our power bills, and the province is also kicking in some money for that as well, to a tune of $60 million a year at the present time. So it's a substantial amount of money. So why would municipalities want to do this? Well, number one, if a municipality does this, it's going to be cost to the taxpayers, the municipal taxpayers. And as far as I'm personally concerned, and most of the people I talk to, we're overtaxed as it is now, a municipality. And I believe it's time the municipalities, and then they're struggling. They are struggling. And as a critic, I've talked to many of the municipal councillors and wardens and mayors, and indeed they're having a difficult time providing the services, the infrastructure services that indeed they should be providing. Well, this renewable energy is a great thing, and it's a wonderful thing. But when you really look at it, look at the whole picture here, it's really the responsibility of the province to do this, or through the Efficiency Nova Scotia, through economic development, or whatever the case may be. That's who should be doing this. The people that can provide forgivable loans, interest-free loans, forgivable interest on loans, all kinds of different ways this could be tackled. That would be a lot more efficient than municipalities doing it. Well, start with the municipalities going to have to set a bureaucratic structure up to handle this. So immediately, there's extra cost. Extra cost. Now, who's going to pay for that? Is that going to be on your general tax rate, which probably some of the municipalities will do? And if that's the case, in some way, your taxes are going to go up to cover that. So if indeed you go through this process and you find that it costs more to do it this way, and then how are they going to buy these things? Are they going to go to selected suppliers and purchase these things and sell them back to the consumer? Is the consumer going to be able to go pick the ones out they want and then finance it through the municipality? And if that's the case, that's what banks are for. That's what credit unions are for. That's what people like Efficiency Nova Scotia is for. And, we've really got to put an effort into renewable energy. And as you look and wonder what type of renewable energy this is going to be. Is this going to be electric solar panels? Is it going to be hot water solar panels? Is it going to be heating solar panels? What's it going to be? And the leaves are wide open. And I can tell you, I just recently renovated my home. Well, not recently, over the last several years, I've been working renovating my home. And when I first bought my home 7 years ago, that I'm in now, if I would have put solar panels on it for heating, I would have absolutely wasted my money, because there's no way possible they would even partially help to heat my home. Now that I've spent several $1,000s insulating my home properly, getting in place, solar panels now make sense. But it was awfully expensive getting from where I was to where I am today. and making sure that home was energy efficient. And I still have more work to do to this to make it more energy efficient. But I believe once I'm done the insulating and the work that has to be done, and I've talked to many other people going through the same process I've been going through, that indeed solar panel would probably heat my home. Because I heat with wood now, and when I heat with wood, at night I let the fire go out in the evening, probably 9 or 10 o'clock. Don't have a fire on all evening. And in the morning I get up at 6 o'clock in the morning, and the temperature in the house has gone down 1 or 2 degrees. It doesn't matter how windy it is outside, how cold it is, that's all the temperature loss in the house is. If you had a solar panel to heat it up through the day in the wintertime, it makes sense with that kind of temperature drop. It used to be, I go to bed in the evening, let the fire go the same way, and it'd be up at 20 or 24 degrees, and I get up in the morning, it'd be 12 degrees in the house. 12 degrees. That's how important insulation is. So you just set off a municipality to provide solar panels. And the ability to do this, it's got to go hand in hand with energy conservation that makes it worthwhile. And Efficiency Nova Scotia is the organization that's been set up by this government, to make that happen. And they're actually working on making homes more efficient. And I will say that they've done a very good job so far. And I've had some constituents in my riding that have taken advantage of some of the programs. And indeed, it will help them in the coming years to help heat their homes and make it more efficient and more cost effective. And indeed, that's where we all need to go. Less use of fossil fuel power, less use of electricity, and whatever the case may be. But this standalone, to do this, does not make sense the way it's written. It doesn't make sense. And the municipalities shouldn't be in the business of providing this type of loan to individuals. They shouldn't. Now, it's really a dilemma here because you want people to get off the grid, more and more off the grid, as everyone says, less and less dependence on fossil fuel power. And the municipalities recognize this, and they realize that if this is going to happen, the province hasn't done it. They haven't made this available, make it sensible for someone to get a loan, and to get this equipment properly. So they've decided to step up and say, okay, let's see if we can help individuals do it. So, you know, I don't blame them for coming forward and requesting this kind of legislation. But as this moves forward, and one of the arguments I've heard from individuals, well, if someone can't afford to get a loan to buy this equipment, the municipality can do it. They can put down a local improvement charge. And for anyone that doesn't know what a local improvement charge, basically what it is that people are given so long to pay for a service they provided from the municipality. And an example of that would be a sewer improvement charge, local improvement charge, where sewer's been installed in an area or water's been installed in an area. And I can tell you that happened in my area for water. And I'm having people now having very great difficulty paying for this. So to make it affordable for people, it doesn't make sense under this program. Because the way the municipalities do it, they set it up generally for 5 or 10 years for local improvement charge. The local improvement charge then is applied the same as property taxes. So it comes under property tax bill, and it usually takes about a year after this is done. And now, but with these, we'll be probably quicker than that. And then the first year, you pay principal only. So if you owe $10,000, you would pay $1,000 the first year. The problem comes in the second year. When you get the second year's bill, the second year, the bill, instead of being $1,000 in principal, it's $1,000 in principals and $1,000 in interest. So you get a $2,000 bill on your property tax bill to cover the next year. And it goes down a little bit in interest each year till the 10 years till it's done. However, if you do not pay this local improvement charge for 3 years, it's the same as not paying your property taxes. And under legislation was passed in this House, the municipality has no choice but to sell that person's property and redeem their money for taxes and the local improvement charges, in other words, putting people out of their home. So if you go through this whole process and see how it possibly could work, it doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make sense when municipalities do this. As I say, the municipalities are struggling now, and it's just another thing that they have to do and try to do. And as they try to do this, it gets more and more strain on their finances, more and more strain on their staff, And it's complex. Putting solar panels of any type on your property is pretty complex. You have to have people that know what they're doing to do this and put it in place so it'll work. If you're going to use an electric one with storage batteries, there's a huge expense for the batteries. They do work well if they're set up right, but it's a huge expense. And you have to consider all this before you make a decision to do it. But if it sounds easy and say, okay, here's a package that the municipality offers, and it's $10,000 or $20,000, we'll finance it, put it on your property tax bill, and away you go. Now, it's not like at the bank where you pay payments every month, and your payments on that might be $100 or $150 or $500 a month, and you know what it's going to be, and you've got to pay that, and if you don't pay it, they're very quickly notify you that it's not been paid. But these things, with the municipalities with local improvement charge, can drag on for a long time. You'll get notices, but then all of a sudden you find out you've got a big bill. You may have a bill for, $15,000 or $20,000 you've got to pay immediately, or your house goes for taxes. And I see that every day. In my riding, I see it every day. And this is going to make it more complex for people to understand and realize what the consequences are if they don't pay these taxes. When I say taxes, they're property tax and local improvement charges. And that's the meantime, if the municipality comes along and says, okay, we're also going to put in curbs or sidewalks or whatever the case may be, and another local improvement charge after you already got solar panels in place, then your local improvement charge could double, triple, or quadruple. And it's a huge thing, and this thing can sneak up on people. And I've seen it happen. I've seen it happen over and over again. I talked to some people the other day, and they have something that a $20,000 local improvement charge they have to pay right now, and it's due now. If they don't pay it, their property is going for sale. It's going for sale. Think about that. Think about the option. If you go to the bank, or if you go to another lending organization, whatever it may be, or a leasing company, typically, if you finance it properly and you can't pay for it, they will come and remove it, and you'll have a bad debt, and you'll have bad credit, of course, but you won't lose your house. You shouldn't lose your house. But with this setup, you can lose your house. So when people think this is a great idea, it's good in theory, but if you look at the thing and you look at it in detail, it's not a really wise idea. We've seen the municipalities get involved in more and more things. And when you look and you talk to the municipalities, and we talk about the MOU being canceled, and the minister told me the other day in question period, there's no property tax increases. Well, that's odd. I got a letter from Queens and said they're going up 3.6 cents on the tax rate per 100. Strange. Municipality here, H.R. Ramey said the taxes went down. They went on the residential properties and went down. Business properties went way up to cover for this MOU. That's a tax increase. So the minister wants to check his notes. And I've got letters from several other municipalities, the same sort of thing, 2.5 cent rate increase, and more increases residentially to cover for this. And it's the towns, the municipalities, and it goes on and on. So if they get this geared up, it means they're going to have to hire more staff to look after this. They're going to have to hire the expertise that know what goes on with these things to make sure they do. And how are they going to do the purchasing? Are they going to do the purchasing in a way that that it's fair and open? Someone can actually go and negotiate the best possible deal they can with a supplier or a series of different suppliers and get the product that you really want? Or is a municipality going to say, there's the people we put the standing offer with and you only can buy from them? That doesn't make sense. That may not suit your building and what you have to deal with. And how is that going to tie into, as I already talked about, if it's a heating system you're putting in, a heating system, the municipality don't care if your place is not insulated properly. They don't care. They're going to let you buy this thing. It'll be absolutely useless. Absolutely useless. And it'd be better to spend that same amount of money and insulate your home first before you install a solar heating system to make sure it will work when you get there. So what kind of an assessment system are they going to have? None. None. None according to this act. But Efficiency Nova Scotia has all that in place. They have it in place. They're the organization that should be doing this. They have the funding to do it. They have the expertise to do it. They have the people. They have everything in place to do it. They have the assessment process they put in place when they start. They have the assessment and put in place when they're done. And over time, they could evaluate the different systems to ensure that the systems are being sold. Actually, number one, they work. Number 2, they're the most efficient you can buy. And number 3, the most cost-efficient ones you can possibly get. And this subject is very complex. And most people don't understand it, and they don't really have the time to find out all about it. And they say, well, okay, I'm going to go buy this item, and it'll work well. It's like the experience I've had recently is several of my friends went out and bought pellet stoves. So they went to the local hardware store and they bought one. Sounds great. They did work pretty good, pretty good. Within a year, problems started. Problems started with these. They jam up, the motors quit on them, and they spent $1,500 to $2,000 on these pellet stoves. They work good when they work, but when they don't work, you've got a major problem. And then I find out, when I talk to the people that have successfully put them in place, there's some very, very high quality ones you can get that cost $4,000 to $5,000. They've run them for 8 to 10 years with absolutely no repairs, no problems at all. They run every day. So when you look at the capital cost, it's prohibitive for a lot of people. But in the long run, it's cheaper than buying a $1,500 one that doesn't work after a year. And you're going to replace it with another $1,500 one that don't work after another year. So it's really, you really got to look at the cost saving and the ability of something to perform over time. And it's the same with the solar panels. There's all kinds of different ones on the market. What are the best ones? I have no idea. I have no idea. I've never done the research on it. I wouldn't mind having one for my home. Now that I've got it insulated properly, and when I finish insulating it properly, it will work. But until then, it won't work. It simply will not work. Because as fast as the heat is generated by this solar panel, it dissipates out to the building if you're not insulated. So why give the municipality the opportunity to do this, tie up people's capital, if the building isn't built to suit it for the solar panels? And the people that sell the solar panels want them to work, of course, but if someone comes in their door and says, I want to put one on my house, they'll go install it. They will. They want to sell it. They want to make money. And how's the municipality going to know? That's why it's important, like someone like Efficiency Nova Scotia does this and says, okay, if you're going to install a solar panel, you got to make sure for heating, you've got to make sure that your home is efficient enough to install this unit in that you're going to get a return on it. And that's what has to happen. If you don't get a return on it, don't buy it. But when you look at the cost analysis of these things, even a municipality put these hot water heating, solar heating systems in. And from what I can understand from a lot of the people and the cost of them, I believe they're around $4,000. Your payback on these things is like 25 years. And at the end of 25 years, you're going to replace the pumps. You may have to replace the solar panel itself, hot water tank, plumbing, all kinds of things. So then you get more expense. So it's really cost effective to do it. And that's, you know, if you ask anyone that's run a business, you got to make sure that it's cost effective short term and long term. You got to make sure you're going to get your money back in your investment. And if the municipality comes along and makes it easier for people that don't understand this, say, well, I'm going to get a solar panel to heat my house. And my house is going to be heated, and it's going to work great, and you don't have to worry anymore. You pay this one time to us and get free energy from then on. Then they find out, no, they don't quite do that. And the oil bill, maybe they have an oil furnace in their house, and the oil bill goes from $2,000 a year to $1,800 a year because you get solar panel because you're not insulated well. And then you get this bill that you got to pay $1,000 or $2,000 a year for the solar system you've got. You're going backwards, and you're going backwards quickly. And people have to understand this. And the municipal government really doesn't have the expertise to put this in place without hiring a substantial number of staff that's trained to understand this equipment and what you need to do to make it efficient and work efficiently. So I think this bill, even though it was asked for by the municipalities, is not the answer to solar heating panels, or solar panels of any kind, electric or otherwise, or the heating ones in homes. It has to be a combination of things that happen. And if you're not prepared to provide these combination of things, they won't work. And it's an investment. It's the same as buying, it's the same as buying a car that's electric, and if it doesn't work well, you get nowhere to plug it in. If you can't plug it in somewhere to make it work, it's no good. Very efficient when it runs, but if you can't recharge it, it's no good. It's the same sort of thing with a system like this. These things are, the systems are expensive. The financing through the municipality is expensive. And again, it goes on your tax bill. And people have to understand that. It goes on their tax bill. And what makes up that cost of that? Well, it's the installation of the unit, the purchase of the unit, the financing costs for the municipality, and you can guaranteed you can get a cheaper financing rate at a bank if you've got good credit, or a credit union, or anywheres besides the municipality. Then you get a bureaucracy that's got to run this in the municipality, which costs a lot of money in the province. And we've already got too many people working for government, not enough people working in business. So, you know, it just builds this bureaucracy bigger and bigger and bigger, more and more expensive. And that has to fuel itself, and they want to put more and more of these out here. And at the end of the day, I don't think this is a good investment or a business that the municipality should be in. Now, the province was to say, we're going to work with the municipalities and Efficiency Nova Scotia, and the only way the municipality can have one of these installed is if the Efficiency Nova Scotia goes in, or Clean Nova Scotia, and does an energy audit on the home and said, okay, you're going to use this for heating. This will work. This will save you so many dollars a year, and your payback is so many years. After taking all the costs into consideration, it will work. If that was the case, it would make sense. But I don't see this in this bill. It just gives the opportunity for municipalities to provide this, and it just doesn't make any sense without doing the whole picture on this to see how it's going to affect everybody that has it. And if you don't do that, if you don't do the whole picture of this and look at the whole cost, the payback on it, it doesn't make any sense. Now, I don't know how we can say that any more simply than that, but that's the fact. And it goes back to everything, you know. If you go, you think I should, I think probably I should repeat that again, you know. But it's to make it very clear. But it's the same as buying a wood stove. You put a wood stove in your home. A wood stove will heat a house if it's poorly insulated or whatever it is. If you get the right size wood stove, it's efficient enough, and it's installed properly, it will do a job. However, if you don't have a supply wood yourself, it may actually be, by the time you pay for the wood stove, the chimney, all the installation, all the other things you need to do, it may be more expensive to put that wood stove in and buy firewood than it is to heat your house in a traditional way and insulate your home better with the same amount of money. So it's all these cost factors you have to look at. So, and Efficiency Nova Scotia is doing exactly that. They're going in, they're going to say, they say, well, it makes sense if you insulate, and if you over-insulate, which you can't do if it's done properly, you can't over-insulate, but you're going to make sure you get ventilation, it will ensure that the people are getting a return on the investment. That's what this is all about. It's no good making everything in it very efficient if you don't have a return on your investment. And, you know, as we look at this on the surface of it, it does make sense. We've got to move away from dependence on fossil fuel power and all the costs we've had. The government's got a commitment that I don't think they will make, and as a present rate, they're going to renewable energy goal. And at the rate they're going, it's not going to happen. It's just simply not going to happen. We've got to make it easier for people to do things. And until we get the renewable energy suppliers off the grid so they can sell to the end customers, it doesn't make sense. And we go through this whole energy debate. This bill is actually an energy debate. It doesn't sound that way. When you say under the Governance Act, allow the amendment to the municipality to sell solar panels. That's what it's coming down to. They're not in the business of making them. They're in the business of providing service to customers. And the municipality should be looking after the streets that they own and maintain, their sidewalks, their curbs, their sewer, their water, all those sort of things. And the municipalities are drifting away from that cost. And you see huge tax bills, and particularly here in the Halifax Regional Municipality we're getting. You get an average home here, in a modest home here now, you're paying up $3,000, $4,000 a year in property taxes. $3,000 or $4,000 a year. People on fixed income are paying taxes like that. I mean, anyone that doesn't live here in the regional municipality doesn't understand this. And you're paying lots of times for services you don't receive. I live in a rural area. I pay as much tax on my property for a house the same size as in downtown Halifax. Same tax. My streets are plowed by the Department of Transportation, province. I have a composite fire department with regular and volunteer firemen. Only in the rural areas we have that, so only half of our firemen are paid for. I have no sidewalks, no curbs, no hope of water and sewer. I have street lights, but they're only on every second pole. We don't get them on every pole like you do in the city. And only in some areas you're allowed to have them, so they don't have many street lights. We get garbage collection, though. Get garbage collection, but not the same service as the city. We got the green bins. The green bins are always smelly and a problem, right? They're always a problem. And every 2 weeks, in the rural areas, your green bin's cleaned out. And every 2 weeks, your blue bag gets picked up in the rural areas. But if you live in this city, it's every week. 2 levels of service. 2 levels of service. So that's exactly makes it under second-class citizens. But yet the municipality justifies it and said, well, it's too expensive to pick it every week. We don't want it picked up every week. Let the rest of the city pick it up every 2 weeks like we have to do. And there's ways to look after this material. The blue bag, there's no problem. It's totally clean. And if you're careful with your green bin, in the summertime you can put some of this stuff and seal it up, put it in your freezer, and put it in the day before it's collected, and it's not a problem. It's not a problem. But and you don't need, there's really not a lot of stuff that goes in the green bin if you do things efficiently. But as you go through this whole process and you see what the municipalities are doing now, so I'm going to have to pay for someone getting solar panels on a home that's not properly insulated, that won't work probably, even though they'll work, but they won't do the job they're designed to do because the house wasn't investigated to make sure it was done properly, because they're just going to provide money to put solar panels in place. Meantime, my taxes are going to go up because we built a new bureaucracy to run all this. So that doesn't make any sense. I mean, so as you go through this whole process, it doesn't make any sense for the municipality to do this. And we should have never, ever passed the bill to start with for the regional municipality here in Halifax to do it. Because the bureaucracy there is getting so big and so expensive that we just can't afford it anymore. It's really, really getting difficult. So, as you go through this very mundane, simple request from the municipality saying we want to be able to finance is a word, I guess, solar panels, it's really not that simple. So if you get one of these small, let's do a worst case scenario. Let's say we got a municipality, a small municipality in rural Nova Scotia, declining population, reduced revenue from property taxes because the value of the properties are going down. And I've talked to some of the mayors and the wardens that are saying exactly that scenario. High power rates, and they get into this scenario. So all of a sudden, they get a whole pile of houses, they got solar panels on them. People can't pay the tax anymore. They're in fixed income, or maybe an industry moves, whatever the case is going to be. Now the municipality's got a financial problem. And this is real. This is real. This is happening today. They got a financial problem. So who do they turn to? Who do they turn to? Come to the province? No. They got to turn. They can't get money from the province. They're not allowed to raise any money except property taxes. So the people that are left to pay for this, their taxes go up again. Less affordable to live in rural Nova Scotia. So then what the people do? They move to Halifax. Just the out-migration, we're seeing the thousands of jobs we're seeing lost already. So all this comes together. And, people may laugh and say, oh, no, that won't happen, it won't happen. But it's happening already for other reasons. So you add more of these things onto the burden that happens to the people in the rural areas, it's going to be more difficult in HRM. HRM at least has a huge tax base at the present time, and it's growing. So they may be able to afford to do this, but some of the rural areas may not. Mr. Speaker, how much time do I have left?
A minute and 20 seconds.
Minute and 20 seconds? So, as you go on with this debate on this bill, So when you go onto this bill and you look at how simple it looks, it makes good sense. I mean, I'm all in favor of getting more solar panels in place, more renewable energy in place, but it's got to be done at an affordable way. It's got to be done in a cost-effective way beside being affordable, because it's two different things. And it's got to be in a way that we don't have more burden on government at any level to do this. And this is what this is. That's why this government set up Efficiency Nova Scotia, and they've brought this bill forward, not putting the two things together. It doesn't make any sense. So if you do that, and you see what happens when government gets involved in anything, number one, the cost goes up through the roof immediately. Probably the cost of solar panels will go through the roof because they get it financed, and it's a problem. So, Mr. Speaker, I'd probably like to adjourn debate, and I would like to continue this as the next opportunity.
The motion for adjournment has been made. All those in favor say aye. All those against say nay. Motion is carried. Now recognize the Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, that concludes the government's business for today, and now I turn it over to the House Leader for the Progressive Conservative Party. Before I do that, the hours for tomorrow will be 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. Thank you.
The Honourable House Leader for the Progressive Conservative Party.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Tomorrow, after daily routine and question period, we'll be calling Bill number 26, which is the Cyberbullying Intervention Act, and Bill 29, which is the Child Protection Intervention Act. So with that, I now move that you do rise. We'll meet between the hours of 2 and 6 tomorrow.
The motion for adjournment has been made. All those in favor say aye. All those against say nay. Motion is carried. We will now rise to sit between the hours of 2 p.m. and 6 p.m. tomorrow.